This web tutorial will teach you about the G7 chord. We're using the Adult Piano Adventures book by Faber. But before we start with the G7 chord, let's review the chords you've already learned. Turn to page 50. On page 50, you see the C chord. The C chord is a triad because it has 3 notes. These 3 notes are built in thirds. C to E and E to G. C triad. In the key of C, the C chord is a tonic chord, since the C is the first scale degree, the tonic, and that's the note that the chord is built on. Then, looking ahead to page 94, we learned another chord, the G chord and the G sus4 chord. These chords are also triads. They have 3 notes that are built in thirds. G to B to D, the G triad. Obviously in the key of G, the G is the tonic chord, since it is built on the first scale degree, the tonic. But in the key of C, the G chord is the dominant chord, the chord that's built on the 5th scale degree. C is the 1 scale degree, D is the 2nd, E is the 3rd, F is the 4th, and G is the 5th. Since the G chord is built on the 5th of the scale, it's the 5 chord or the dominant chord. The G chord is a dominant chord in the key of C. We also see that there's a G sus4 chord where we suspend the third, the B, up to a C, and we play those notes together for the G sus chords. G, C, D. The middle note of the chord has been suspended up to the interval of a 4th instead of the 3rd, as we have in the G triad. Now we are ready to introduce the G7 chord. Turn to page 128. The G7 chord begins with the G triad, G, B, D, but it's a 4-note chord. It adds the 7th scale degree above the root, the F. So it is not a triad since it has more than 3 notes. This 4-note chord is still built on thirds. The G7 chord is spelled G, B, D, F. The G7 chord is built on the 5th scale degree of the key of C. G is the 5th note. It's the dominant note in the key of C, so the G7 chord is called the 5-7. It's built on the 5th scale degree, so it's a 5 chord, and it has the interval of the 7th added to the top that makes it the 5-7 chord. It's also called the dominant 7th chord in the key of C. The tonic chord in the key of C and the dominant 7th chords are very important chords. In the key of C, the tonic chord C, E, G, and the dominant chord G, B, D, F are very important chords that are next to each other very often. Since it's very difficult to play the tonic in root position and the dominant 7th in root position, we should change the inversion of the dominant 7th chord to be in close position to the tonic chord. So we will play the C chord, the tonic, in root position. Then we will keep our thumb on G to play the dominant 7th chord in first inversion. This makes these two chords much easier to play in harmonic progression. Let's practice the harmonic progressions on the bottom of page 128. We'll start with the left hand. First, play a 5th, interval of a 5th, in a C major pentascale. Move finger 5 a half step lower to the B. This expands the interval to a 6th. Add the left hand finger 2 on the 4th scale degree, the F, from the major scale. And then end with the tonic chord C. Let's play it again with the repeat. Ready? Play. Repeat. Now let's do the right hand. First, play a 5th in the major pentascale. Now move the thumb a half step lower to the B. It extends the interval to a 6th. Now add the 4th finger to scale degree 4, which is F, from the C major scale. And end with the tonic chord C. Let's play that again with the repeats. Ready? Play. Repeat. These exercises would be helpful to continue to practice at home. Do you know why it's called first inversion? Well, we start with the root position with G as the lowest note. G is the root of the chord. When the root of the chord is in the lowest note, the chord is in root position. For first inversion, we take the lowest note and move it up to the top and move our fingers accordingly to play the same chord. But our bottom note, the root, the G, has been moved to the top. This is first inversion. For second inversion, we take what is now the lowest note, the B, and we move it up to the top. And yes, 7th chords also have a 3rd position, unlike triads that only have 2 positions. Remember, that only have a 2nd position. They do have 3 positions, the root, the 1st position, and the 2nd position. But with 7th chords, we have 4 positions, the root, the 1st inversion, the 2nd inversion, and here's our 3rd inversion where we've taken the note and put it on the top once more. Remember, 7th chords do have an extra note, one more note than the triad, since they have 4 notes in their chord. Now, why do we call the G7 a dominant 7th chord? Why do we use this note, this chord, but leave out one of our notes? We are leaving out the D. Why are we leaving out the D when we're practicing our progression? Well, we omitted the D, the 5th of the chord, because it's more comfortable for our hands to play without the 5th. The 5th was the necessary note to select, to leave out, to omit, since we have to have the root, the G, we have to have the 3rd, the B, to determine the quality, whether it's major or minor chord, and since we have a 7th chord, we have to have the 7th, otherwise it would no longer be a 7th chord. So D, the 5th, is the only scale degree that we can leave out. Let's look again at the inverted G7